Marcus stared at his reflection in the gym's grimy mirror, sweat dripping from his forehead after just 10 minutes on the treadmill. At 32, he was already gasping for breath, his once athletic frame now soft and unfamiliar. The man looking back at him bore little resemblance to the confident college athlete he'd once been. The wake-up call had come 3 days earlier during his annual physical. Dr. Williams had delivered the news with clinical precision: pre-diabetes, high blood pressure, and a body fat percentage that put him in the obese category. "You're heading down a dangerous path, Marcus," she'd said, her voice gentle but firm. "Without significant changes, you're looking at serious health complications within the next 5 years." That night, Marcus had sat in his car outside his apartment, overwhelmed by the weight of his reality. His career as a software engineer had consumed his life. 18-hour workdays fueled by energy drinks and fast food had become his norm. He'd convinced himself that success meant sacrifice, that taking care of his body was a luxury he couldn't afford while building his startup. But success had proven elusive. His app had failed to gain traction, his savings were depleted, and he'd been forced to take a corporate job that left him feeling empty and defeated. Worse yet, his relationships had crumbled. Sarah, his girlfriend of 3 years, had left 6 months ago, citing his obsessive work habits and emotional unavailability. Now, standing in this mirror, Marcus realized that his pursuit of success had actually led him further away from it. He wasn't successful. He was a shell of his former self, unhealthy, unhappy, and alone. The gym was nearly empty at 5:30 a.m., save for a few dedicated regulars who moved through their routines with quiet determination. Marcus watched an older man, probably in his 60s, methodically working through a series of exercises. The man's movements were precise, practiced, born from years of repetition. There was something admirable about his consistency, his unwavering commitment to showing up. "First time back in a while." The older man approached Marcus during a water break, extending a calloused hand. "I'm Frank." Marcus nodded, embarrassed by his obvious struggle. "Marcus. And yeah, it's been too long." Frank's smile was understanding, not judgmental. "I've been coming here for 15 years. Same routine, same time, 6 days a week. People think I'm crazy, but you know what? I've never felt better in my life." 15 years? Marcus was incredulous. "The same routine?" "Well, it evolves," Frank chuckled. "But the consistency, that never changes. See, everyone wants the magic bullet, the secret formula, but there isn't one. There's just showing up day after day, even when you don't feel like it. Especially when you don't feel like it." Frank's words echoed in Marcus's mind as he drove home. Consistency. Such a simple concept, yet one he'd never truly embraced. He'd always been an all-or-nothing person, working obsessively for weeks, then burning out completely. He'd start ambitious workout plans only to abandon them after missing a few sessions. He'd commit to healthy eating for a week before binge-eating pizza at 2 a.m. That evening, Marcus sat at his kitchen table with a notebook and pen. For the first time in years, he wasn't planning some grand, revolutionary change. Instead, he wrote down small, achievable goals: 20 minutes of exercise daily, 8 glasses of water, 8 hours of sleep, and 1 healthy meal prepared at home. As he closed the notebook, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in months: hope. Not the desperate, grasping hope of a quick fix, but the quiet confidence that comes from making a simple decision to begin. Tomorrow, he would start showing up for himself. The alarm buzzed at 5 a.m. sharp. Marcus's hand instinctively moved to hit snooze, a habit perfected over years of avoiding morning commitments. But this time, he paused. Frank's weathered face flashed in his mind, along with his words about showing up, especially when you don't feel like it. Marcus swung his legs out of bed before his mind could negotiate. The first victory of the day belonged to action over excuses. The gym felt different at this hour, quieter, more serious. Frank was already there, of course, methodically working through his routine with the same focused intensity Marcus had observed days earlier. Their eyes met across the weight room, and Frank offered a subtle nod of approval. 20 minutes later, Marcus was drenched in sweat but strangely energized. His workout had been simple: 10 minutes on the treadmill, some basic bodyweight exercises, and stretching. Nothing heroic, nothing Instagram-worthy, but he'd done it. Day 1 was complete. The pattern continued. Day 2 brought muscle soreness and a voice in his head insisting he deserved a rest day. Marcus went anyway. Day 3 was a disaster. He could only manage 15 minutes before feeling lightheaded. But he showed up. By day 7, something subtle had shifted. "You're building momentum," Frank observed during their brief morning interaction. "I can see it in how you move, how you carry yourself. The body remembers consistency faster than the mind does." At work, Marcus noticed changes beyond the physical. His afternoon energy crashes were less severe. His concentration improved. When his manager, Janet, assigned him to lead a challenging project, Marcus found himself accepting rather than deflecting, a stark contrast to his recent pattern of avoiding additional responsibilities. The project involved developing a mobile app for a local nonprofit, something that would have excited him years ago but had felt overwhelming in his depleted state. As he dove into the requirements, Marcus made a decision that surprised even him. He would apply the same consistency principle to his work that he was learning in the gym. Instead of his old pattern of marathon coding sessions followed by burnout, Marcus committed to 3 focused hours each evening after dinner. No more, no less. When inspiration struck and he wanted to work longer, he forced himself to stop. When motivation lagged and he wanted to skip a session, he sat at his computer. Anyway, the discipline felt foreign at first. His programmer's brain was accustomed to riding waves of inspiration, working 18 hours straight when the code was flowing, then crashing for days when it wasn't. But this new approach, steady, measured, predictable, began producing surprising results. 3 weeks in, Marcus realized he'd made more consistent progress on the nonprofit's app than he had on any project in recent memory. The code was cleaner, more thoughtful. Without the pressure of marathon sessions, he found himself making better architectural decisions, writing more maintainable solutions. Sarah texted him during this period, a casual, "How are you doing?" message that would have sent him spiraling 6 months earlier. Instead of the desperate, lengthy response he might have crafted, Marcus replied simply, "Doing well. Hope you are too." Her response came an hour later. "You sound different. More centered." That evening, Marcus stood in front of his bathroom mirror, the same spot where he'd confronted his deteriorating health a month earlier. The changes weren't dramatic. He'd lost maybe 8 pounds, gained some muscle tone, but something in his eyes was different. There was a steadiness there, a quiet confidence that hadn't existed before. He thought about Frank's 15-year commitment, about the older man's quiet satisfaction with his routine. For the first time, Marcus could envision himself maintaining these habits not for weeks or months, but for years. The idea didn't feel overwhelming. It felt liberating. His phone buzzed with a calendar reminder. Week 4 weigh-in. Marcus had been tracking his progress not with daily obsessiveness, but with weekly check-ins, another lesson in consistency over intensity. As he stepped on the scale, he realized the number mattered less than the fact that he was still here, still showing up, still keeping his promise to himself. The scale read 10 pounds less than his starting weight, but more importantly, Marcus felt 10 pounds lighter in spirit. 2 months into his new routine, Marcus encountered his first real test. The nonprofit project had gained attention from other organizations, and Janet approached him with an opportunity that would have made his younger self salivate. A chance to lead a development team for a major client with the potential for significant bonuses and career advancement. The catch? The timeline was aggressive, demanding the kind of round-the-clock commitment that had previously defined his work life. The old Marcus would have said yes immediately, abandoning his morning workouts and evening routines in pursuit of this golden opportunity. Instead, Marcus asked for a day to consider. That evening, he found himself at the gym despite feeling mentally drained from the decision ahead of him. Frank was there, as always, moving through his routine with the same methodical precision. "You look troubled, son," Frank observed during his rest period. Marcus shared his dilemma, expecting Frank to offer the conventional wisdom about seizing opportunities. Instead, the older man was quiet for a long moment. 15 years ago, I got an offer like that," Frank finally said. "Promotion to regional manager, big salary bump, but it would have meant traveling 4 days a week. Missing my morning routine, eating airport food, sleeping in hotels." He paused, adjusting his grip on the barbell. "I turned it down." Marcus was surprised. "Do you ever regret it?" Frank smiled, gesturing around the gym. "Look at me. I'm 67 years old, in the best shape of my life, married to my best friend for 42 years, and I sleep like a baby every night. That promotion? It went to my colleague Jim. He made good money for 5 years before his first heart attack." The next morning, Marcus made his decision. He would take the project, but with conditions. Reasonable working hours, a sustainable timeline, and the understanding that his morning routine was non-negotiable. To his surprise, Janet agreed without hesitation. "Honestly, Marcus," she said, "your work quality has improved dramatically these past few months. If maintaining your morning routine is part of that, I'm all for it." The project became a crucible for Marcus's new philosophy. When the team faced a critical deadline, the old Marcus would have pulled an all-nighter. Instead, he organized the work efficiently, delegated effectively, and maintained his boundaries. The team not only met their deadline, but delivered exceptional quality. More importantly, Marcus began to see the compound effect of his consistency in unexpected areas. His morning discipline had created mental clarity that improved his decision-making throughout the day. His physical energy translated into emotional resilience. His commitment to boundaries earned respect rather than resentment from his colleagues. The changes weren't limited to work and fitness. Marcus had started reading again, just 20 pages each evening before bed. In 2 months, he'd finished 4 books, more than he'd read in the previous 2 years combined. He'd begun cooking simple, healthy meals, discovering a meditative quality in the routine of meal preparation. Sarah reached out again, this time with a different tone. She was curious about his transformation, asking if they could meet for coffee. When they sat across from each other at their old favorite cafe, her first words were, "You look incredible, but more than that, you seem solid, grounded." "I've learned something about consistency," Marcus replied, surprised by his own clarity. "I used to think success meant big leaps, dramatic changes, but it's actually about showing up for small things every day." Sarah studied his face. "I can see it. You're different, more present." She paused, vulnerability creeping into her voice. "I've been thinking about us, about what went wrong." The old Marcus would have seized this opening desperately, making grand promises about change. Instead, he listened carefully to her words, considered his response, and spoke honestly about his journey without making it about their relationship. "I'm not the same person I was 6 months ago," he said. "But I'm also not trying to prove anything to anyone else. This change is for me, whether we reconcile or not." His honesty seemed to affect Sarah deeply. They talked for 2 hours, not about getting back together, but about growth, about learning, about the people they were becoming. When they parted, there was no dramatic reunion, but there was respect, understanding, and the possibility of something healthier in the future. That night, Marcus reflected on the compound effect Frank had unknowingly taught him. Each day's small disciplines were accumulating into something larger, not just physical transformation, but a fundamental shift in how he approached life. He was becoming the kind of person who kept promises to himself, who could be trusted with bigger challenges because he'd proven faithful with smaller ones. Tomorrow would mark day 63 of his new routine, not a milestone worth celebrating. Publicly, but privately, Marcus felt profound satisfaction in that simple number. Month 4 brought an unexpected challenge: plateau. Marcus's weight loss had stalled, his strength gains had leveled off, and for the first time since beginning his journey, he felt the familiar whisper of discouragement creeping in. Marcus would have interpreted this as failure, a sign that his approach wasn't working. He would have either given up entirely or dramatically overhauled his entire routine in search of faster results. Instead, something had changed in his relationship with progress itself. Plateaus are where most people quit, Frank observed during one of their morning conversations. But they're also where real growth happens. Your body isn't stalling, it's consolidating. All those changes you can't see, they're happening right now. Frank's words proved prophetic in unexpected ways. While Marcus's physical transformation had slowed, other areas of his life were experiencing breakthrough moments. The nonprofit app had launched successfully, earning praise from both the client and Janet. More significantly, 2 other organizations had approached Marcus directly, having heard about his reputation for delivering quality work without the chaos that typically accompanied tight deadlines. At work, Marcus found himself naturally mentoring younger developers, sharing not just technical knowledge but insights about sustainable work practices. He began advocating for realistic project timelines and pushing back against the toxic crunch culture that had nearly destroyed his health. "You've become a different kind of leader," Janet observed during his quarterly review. "More thoughtful, more sustainable. The team trusts you because you're consistent. They know what to expect from you day to day." The plateau in his physical progress was accompanied by deeper psychological shifts. Marcus realized he was no longer exercising primarily to lose weight or gain muscle. The gym had become a place of mental clarity, a daily appointment with discipline that strengthened his resolve in all areas of life. One particularly challenging morning, Marcus woke up with a minor cold, the kind of illness that would have previously derailed his routine for a week. His body felt sluggish, his motivation non-existent. For a moment, he considered staying in bed. After all, he was sick, and rest was important for recovery. But as he lay there, Marcus recognized the subtle difference between genuine need for rest and the voice of resistance that had sabotaged so many previous attempts at change. He got up, went to the gym, and did a modified workout. Gentle stretching, light walking, nothing strenuous. It wasn't his best session, but he'd shown up. Frank noticed his reduced intensity, but said nothing until after the workout. "Smart choice," he commented. "Consistency doesn't mean rigid inflexibility. It means showing up in whatever way you can." That principle proved valuable beyond fitness. When Sarah suggested they try dating again, Marcus applied the same philosophy. Instead of the intense, all-consuming relationship pattern that had characterized their previous time together, they agreed to take things slowly, consistently, building trust through small daily choices rather than grand gestures. Their first redate was simple: a morning walk together followed by coffee. No dramatic declarations, no pressure to recapture their past chemistry. Just 2 people who had grown apart choosing to spend time together and see what developed naturally. "I like this version of you," Sarah said as they walked through the park near Marcus's apartment. "You're more predictable, but in a good way. I know you'll do what you say you'll do." The plateau also brought clarity about his career direction. The success of the nonprofit project had opened doors to freelance opportunities, and Marcus began to envision a different kind of professional life. Instead of climbing the corporate ladder through heroic efforts and unsustainable hours, he could build a consultancy focused on helping organizations develop software efficiently and humanely. The decision wasn't dramatic. No resignation letter, no burning bridges. Instead, Marcus began taking on small freelance projects during his evenings, applying the same disciplined approach that had transformed his health to building his business. 3 focused hours, no more, no less. By month's end, the plateau had revealed itself as something else entirely, a foundation. All those days when progress felt invisible had been building something stronger than quick wins or dramatic transformations. They had been building character, the kind of internal architecture that could support larger ambitions without crumbling under pressure. Marcus's weight hadn't changed in weeks, but his resting heart rate had dropped to levels he hadn't seen since college. His business had gained only 3 clients, but each relationship was built on clear expectations and sustainable practices. His reconciliation with Sarah was progressing slowly, but it felt more solid than their previous passionate but unstable connection. Standing in the gym mirror now, Marcus saw something that hadn't been there at the beginning of his journey. Steadiness. Not the flashy confidence of someone riding a wave of motivation, but the quiet assurance of someone who had learned to trust his own consistency. The plateau hadn't been an obstacle to overcome. It had been a lesson to absorb. 6 months into his transformation, Marcus faced the ultimate test of his newfound consistency, a crisis that would have previously sent his life into complete chaos. It started with a phone call at 6 a.m. on a Tuesday. His father had suffered a heart attack and was in intensive care 3 states away. The old Marcus would have panicked, abandoned all routines, and thrown himself into crisis mode with the same obsessive intensity he'd once brought to failed projects. Instead, Marcus took a deep breath and began making systematic decisions. He arranged for time off work, booked a flight for that afternoon, and then did something that surprised even him. He went to his morning workout. "Going through the motions won't help your father," his anxious mind protested as he drove to the gym. But Marcus had learned to distinguish between the voice of wisdom and the voice of fear disguised as urgency. Frank was there, as always. When Marcus explained the situation, the older man's response was immediate. "Go to your father, but remember, you can't pour from an empty cup. Taking care of yourself isn't selfish during a crisis, it's strategic." The next 3 weeks tested every principle Marcus had developed. Hospital vigils, family stress, sleeping in uncomfortable chairs, eating cafeteria food, everything about the situation seemed designed to derail healthy habits. His sister Lisa, who had arrived the day after him, commented on his apparent calmness. "How are you so centered right now?" she asked during one particularly difficult day when their father's condition had worsened. "I'm falling apart, and you seem steady." Marcus considered her question. 6 months ago, he would have been falling apart too, channeling his anxiety into obsessive research about heart attacks, exhausting himself with worry, making the situation worse with his chaotic energy. "I've learned that consistency isn't just about good times," he replied. "It's especially important during difficult ones." Even in the hospital environment, Marcus found ways to maintain modified versions of his routines. He took morning walks through the hospital corridors. He did bodyweight exercises in the family waiting room during quiet hours. He read for 20 minutes before attempting to sleep each night, even if it was just hospital pamphlets about cardiac recovery. More importantly, he maintained his emotional disciplines. When family members wanted to catastrophize about their father's prognosis, Marcus listened compassionately, but didn't join the spiral of worst-case scenarios. When the stress threatened to reignite old family conflicts, he chose measured responses over reactive ones. His father's recovery was slow but steady, and Marcus found himself naturally applying his consistency principles to the rehabilitation process. Instead of pushing for dramatic improvements, he helped his father set small, achievable daily goals. Walking 10 steps today, 15 tomorrow, focusing on incremental progress rather than comparing current capacity to pre-attack abilities. "You've become the rock of this family," his mother observed one evening. "I don't know how you stay so calm, but it's helping all of us stay sane." The crisis also tested his relationship with Sarah, who had flown out to support him during the second week of his father's hospitalization. She witnessed him under extreme stress and saw how his new patterns of thinking and behaving held up under pressure. "6 months ago, you would have been consumed by this," she said as they sat in the hospital cafeteria. "You would have researched every possible complication, called every doctor you could find, barely slept, and made everyone around you more anxious with your panic." Marcus nodded, recognizing the accuracy of her observation. "I used to think that intensity of worry proved how much I cared. Now I realize it just made me less capable of actually helping." His freelance business faced its own test during this period. 2 clients needed urgent revisions while Marcus was dealing with the family crisis. The old Marcus would have either neglected his family to meet client demands or ignored client needs entirely, creating problems in both areas. Instead, Marcus communicated clearly with his clients about his situation, arranged for reasonable extensions, and even managed to complete some work during quiet hospital hours. His consistent communication and professional handling of the crisis actually strengthened his client relationships rather than damaging them. The real test came when his father was discharged and Marcus returned home. The disruption to his routine had been significant. 3 weeks of hospital schedules, stress eating, irregular sleep, and minimal formal exercise. His old patterns would have led him to either give up entirely, "I've already ruined everything," or attempt a dramatic restart that would inevitably fail. Instead, Marcus simply returned to his routine the morning after arriving home. Not with fanatic intensity, not trying to make up for lost time, but with the same quiet commitment he'd maintained for 6 months. He went to the gym, saw Frank, and picked up where he'd left off. "How's your father?" Frank asked. "Recovering well, and I learned something important while I was gone." "What's that?" "Consistency isn't about perfect circumstances," Marcus replied. "It's about showing up regardless of circumstances." Frank smiled, the expression of someone who had learned the same lesson decades earlier. "Now you're getting it." That evening, Marcus reflected on the past month. His father would make a full recovery. His business had not only survived the crisis, but had grown stronger through his professional handling of it. His relationship with Sarah had deepened as she witnessed his emotional resilience under pressure. But more than any external outcome, Marcus had proven something crucial to himself. The person he had become through 6 months of small daily choices was not fragile. The foundation he had built through consistency was strong enough to support him through genuine adversity. He was no longer someone who succeeded only under ideal conditions. He had become someone who could be counted on, especially when things got difficult. 1 year later, Marcus stood in the same gym mirror where his journey had begun, but the man looking back bore little resemblance to the defeated figure from 12 months earlier. The physical changes were obvious. 40 pounds lighter, visibly stronger, carrying himself with natural confidence. But the deeper transformation was what truly amazed him. The morning ritual that had once required tremendous willpower now felt as natural as brushing his teeth. His body automatically woke at 5 a.m., energized rather than groggy. The gym had evolved from a place of struggle to a sanctuary of clarity, where he processed the day ahead and strengthened both body and resolve. Frank approached, as he had countless mornings before, but today carried special significance. 1 year, the older man observed with satisfaction. "How does it feel?" Different than I expected, Marcus replied honestly. I thought I'd feel more triumphant, maybe? Instead, I just feel like myself. Like this is who I've always been meant to be. Frank nodded knowingly. That's the real transformation right there. It's not about becoming someone else. It's about becoming who you actually are underneath all the chaos and inconsistency. The previous week had brought a milestone that perfectly illustrated this principle. Marcus had officially launched his consultancy, leaving his corporate job to focus full-time on helping organizations build sustainable development practices. The decision wasn't born from desperation or grandiose dreams of quick wealth, but from a year of steady preparation, client relationship building, and financial planning. You're the most reliable contractor I've ever worked with, his largest client had told him during their contract renewal meeting. In an industry full of people who overpromise and underdeliver, you consistently do exactly what you say you'll do when you say you'll do it. Sarah had moved back in 3 months earlier, but their reconciliation looked nothing like their previous relationship. Gone were the dramatic highs and lows, the passionate fights followed by equally passionate reconciliations. Instead, they had built something quieter but infinitely more stable. A partnership based on daily choices, consistent communication, and mutual support for each other's growth. I never understood the appeal of boring until now. She'd laughed the previous evening as they prepared dinner together, a routine they'd established that combined Marcus's newfound love of cooking with Sarah's organizational skills. But this isn't really boring, is it? It's peaceful. The evening routine had become as sacred as the morning one. Dinner together without phones, a walk around the neighborhood, reading for 30 minutes, then conversation before bed. Simple activities, but their consistency had created an intimacy deeper than anything they'd experienced during their more turbulent years. Marcus's father had become an unexpected convert to the consistency philosophy. Following his heart attack, recovery, he'd adopted his own morning routine of gentle exercise and meditation, crediting his son's example with giving him the framework for sustainable health habits at age 64. You saved my life, his father had said during their last phone call. Not just by being there during the heart attack, but by showing me a different way to live. I used to think retirement meant slowing down, doing less. Now I realize it means doing the right things consistently. The business had grown beyond Marcus's projections, but in a controlled, sustainable way. He'd learned to say no to projects that would require unsustainable hours or compromise his values, discovering that selective acceptance actually increased demand for his services. Word had spread about the consultant who delivered excellent work without drama, who met deadlines without burning out his team or himself. During quiet moments, Marcus often reflected on the compound effect that Frank had first introduced him to. Each day's small disciplines had accumulated into capabilities he'd never possessed before. His ability to remain calm under pressure, to make decisions based on principles rather than emotions, to maintain perspective during both setbacks and successes. These weren't personality traits he'd been born with, but skills developed through thousands of small choices. The most profound change was in his relationship with success itself. The old Marcus had chased external validation, the successful startup, the impressive salary, the admiration of others. This Marcus had discovered something more sustainable, the satisfaction of keeping promises to himself, the confidence that came from knowing he could be trusted with his own goals. Standing in the gym that anniversary morning, Marcus realized he no longer thought about his routine as something he had to do, but as something he got to do. The morning workout wasn't a burden to be endured, but a daily celebration of his body's capabilities. The evening reading wasn't a chore, but a conversation with great minds. The consistent work habits weren't restrictions, but the framework that made true creativity possible. Frank finished his workout and approached for their usual brief conversation. "So what's next?" the older man asked. "Any big plans now that you've hit the 1-year mark?" Marcus considered the question that would have once sent him spiraling into elaborate schemes and unrealistic goals. "More of the same," he replied with a smile. "Tomorrow I'll wake up at 5 a.m., come to the gym, work with integrity, love Sarah well, and go to bed having kept my promises to myself, just like today, just like yesterday." And the day after that? The same. Frank's weathered face broke into a grin of complete understanding. "Now you've got it figured out. Consistency creates success, but the real success is becoming someone who values consistency for its own sake." As Marcus drove home that morning, he thought about the man who had first stepped into this gym 12 months earlier, desperate, defeated, grasping for a quick fix to deep problems. That man could never have imagined that the solution wouldn't come from dramatic gestures or revolutionary changes, but from the simple decision to show up day after day for small commitments that would compound into a completely transformed life. The morning sun was rising over the city, the same sun that had risen on every day of his journey. But like everything else in Marcus's life, its reliability had become not a source of boredom, but of profound comfort. Some things could be counted on, and through his year of consistent choices, Marcus had become one of them. He was living proof that consistency creates success, not just in achieving goals, but in becoming the kind of person worth being. And tomorrow, he would wake up and prove it all over again.